Welcome back. It's time to get the Peloponnesian War underway. This is the real tragedy that beset Greece in the last 30 years of the 5th century BC. And really, though it's understandable from a historical perspective why it occurred, there is something rather tragic in itself that Athens went through this, because they had indeed contributed a great deal of material and intellectual possessions to the rest of the Greek world and to posterity. And this was the time period when they were, in fact, the most productive. It's unfortunate, therefore, to see all of that gradually eclipsed. In any event, though, we now initiate the Peloponnesian War. Welcome back from your midterm exam. We now are going to get into the actual war itself. And we will, of course, cross-reference that with your 4 plays of Euripides. You've already learned about the tragic playwright Euripides in the previous video, and now we will get underway with the war itself. So the war is considered to last for 27 years, from 431 to 404 BC. I'm going to talk here about how the war itself actually got initiated, and then we'll get into the steps of the war itself in all the remaining videos in the Athenian history segment. First of all, as we talked about in the video prior to the midterm, the declaration of war was formally carried out at the Congress at Sparta in 432 BC. This was the point when the Spartans finally did agree with their allies, even though it was not a unanimous opinion, that that war did need to be carried out against the Athenians on the basis of these pretexts: the Corinthian conflict, the Corcyraean problem, the Megarian decree, the conflict with Potidæa, which, by the way, was still under siege at this time. All of this persuaded the Spartans to go after the Athenians on behalf of the Spartan allies, as the word was passed down. However, the Spartans still attempted to negotiate with the Athenians to try to fend off the war. And the sticking point that could be found in the wording of the 30 Years' Peace was that any conflicts that developed between any allies on the two sides were supposed to be negotiated by third-party arbitration. As with the term regarding the joining by neutral polis, this was another one of those well-intentioned clauses that unfortunately had a hidden flaw in it, which was this was presumed to be a case of 2 allies that were in conflict that would then be able to find third-party arbitration, and that might make sense. But apparently nothing was taken into account what was to happen if Sparta and Athens themselves were the conflicting parties up at the top, because other than possibly Argos, there really was not any city that was in a position, certainly not non-partisan enough, to be in a position to be able to arbitrate between those 2 cities. So that was the difficulty. So what Pericles stated in response to the Spartan negotiations for avoiding war was that essentially the Spartans were in no position to tell the Athenians that they could not run the empire exactly as they chose, and that if the Spartans did have a complaint with the Athenians, any act that they had taken, that the correct procedure was to submit the matter for third-party arbitration. And Pericles' claim was that the Spartans had, in fact, never done that in good faith. And so Pericles operated on the relatively nominal, legalistic premise that because the exact wording of the peace had not been followed, of course, in a manner that's convenient for Pericles and the Athenians, that in fact the Athenian Empire could simply continue on exactly as Pericles saw it. So that's basically where things got stalled in 432 BC, oddly with the war still not underway. It ends up being Thebes and Plataea, 431 BC, the following year, that actually turns the war from a hypothetical into a reality. Thebes had been bothered by the city of Thebes for quite a Plataea, for quite a long time, because Plataea was in Theban territory but was allied with the Athenians as a member of the Delian League. And recall that the Plataeans were the only city that went to assist the Athenians back in 490 BC at Marathon. So what happens? Thebes tries to set up a coup by sending their representatives in disguise into the city of Plataea to try to formulate a way with the Plataean government to get the Thebans into the gate. Obviously, if the Plataeans could be seen as voluntarily allowing the Thebans in, then that would not violate the peace because there would be no direct attack against an ally. That's what the Thebans appeared to set up, and the Thebans probably felt that if, as a result of their act, that war started anyway, that was all the better because the Thebans were itching to get the war underway and probably felt that the Spartans were being much too slow and cumbrous to react to what were perceived as injustices by the Athenians. So this was set into motion. On the critical day when the coup was supposed to occur, the Theban army was supposed to come around to the gates of Plataea and be ready to enter the city once the gates were opened. And bear in mind that in the ancient world with walls, there was no way to get over the walls. They didn't have any kind of machinery like a catapult that could get them over. So really, siege and betrayal were the only ways to get their way into the city. As you could see, of course, with the Trojan horse that's used to basically breach the walls of Troy in order to get the Greeks inside the walls of the city. Unfortunately, the critical day came and there was a huge rainstorm, and the Theban army that was supposed to arrive at the gates got bogged down and failed to arrive. As a result, the Plataeans became suspicious of their visitors and eventually realized that they actually were Thebans and took them into custody. The Plataean government then sent word to the Athenian government to find out what to do with these prisoners. When the Athenian government responded by saying, "Don't touch them, we'll come in and deal with it," the Plataeans unfortunately acted too quickly and actually executed the Theban prisoners, properly speaking, illegally, if you consider what passed for international relations in the day. Well, now the Thebans were genuinely angry at the Plataeans, and now they attacked in full force and earnest to try to reduce the city. The Athenians, therefore, did have to come in earnest as well to defend the city, and as a result, what started off as this coup attempt actually led to a real armed conflict between Thebes, I should say among Thebes, Plataea, and Athens. And the result of all this, as you probably can perceive, we end up with cases of Athenian and Spartan allies in direct conflict with each other, and that finally is what does formally break the terms of the 30 years peace, and now in fact war is fully underway, given that it had already been formally declared by Sparta the year before. So ironically, as tends to happen with a lot of these wars, it's not the main competitors in the war who start it, it's the guys on the side. And in this case, it was the Thebans who did it. The Thebans would, of course, end up enjoying the great victory that the Spartans would ultimately score against the Athenians. The Thebans, however, would not be very happy with the outcome of that victory much later. We may touch upon that briefly when we complete the whole series of videos on the Peloponnesian War. All right, so when we come back to the next video, we will talk about the strategies that were used, and then we'll start outlining the events that occurred. We'll see you next video.